Hello, good morning everyone. We're going to start with a little discussion of how to adjust your strokes, use those for interesting lines using the pen tool. So if you remember, as we work with the pen tool, we can create our custom lines, drawing them casually with our anchor points and our curves, and we can adjust them however we like. One of the unique things with the stroke palette is the ability to change the character and quality of those lines. Now by default, when we're using the line and we adjust the stroke, we get a very symmetrical square line with square ends and a uniform shape all the way along the edge of the vector line. But over here on the side, we can control a number of other settings that change the character of those stroke lines. With the new Properties window in the latest release of Adobe, you can get right down to the stroke palette, which is there for you with a variety of adjustments. Some of those things include things like you can select the rounded cap setting, where you can change the shape of the edge of the line, or you can extend the cap beyond the edge of the anchor point. The default is a straight square shape on the end. You can also do other things like dashed lines, and you can adjust the spacing and the gap between the lines to create a different dashed line like that. Also, you have some clip art choices here, such as you've got your arrowheads, which you can attach to a line. So you can make a directional line using those clip art shapes. Same with adding the feathers to the end of your line. So of course there are a lot of little features like that here inside Illustrator which you can use. But for today what we're going to focus on are some of the adjustment profiles. So if you look down in that same window, let me pull that up again. If you look here on the profile setting, this is where you can do something a little more artistic. One of the nice things about cartoon artwork is to have line quality that is variable. And to control that on a stroke, you can use these pre-existing profiles here available in that profile selector. You can also, if you look a little closer here, you can change the direction of that stroke, so it can swap left to right or right to left, or you can pick one of the symmetrical ones that gives you a thick and thin line all the way across the shape of that line. What are some other stroke adjustments that we can make? Well, let's look at how strokes affect shapes. I'm going to go ahead and draw a square over here on the page, and same as before, I can adjust the stroke size by clicking over on the point size, increasing that size up and down. If you look inside that stroke palette, and for this I'm going to go ahead and detach the stroke palette so I can expand it and have it visible as I zoom in a little bit closer. Because the default setting for a stroke is to surround your vector line, so it's on the inside and the outside of the shape. There's also something here on the stroke palette where you can adjust the alignment, so you can force it to be on the inside of your shape or on the outside. Now right now that may not seem like a big deal, but when it comes to decorating certain shapes and making specific adjustments to things like text, or when you start superimposing multiple shapes on top of one another, it might be important to be able to change the position of that stroke. I also want to show you another little setting that a lot of people don't know about when it comes to the stroke. And it can be quite frustrating actually as you use stroked objects and shapes. And here's what happens. When you have an object and you scale that object and you reduce its size, I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate so you can see what it does. Let's say I take this shape and I make a duplicate, and when I scale it, Well, the object got bigger, but the stroke line stayed the same thickness, the same width. Now again, looking at these two squares, so what? Well, sometimes when you're doing really delicate artwork and you've spent a lot of time adjusting your strokes, well, when you go and scale that object, those strokes, they stay the same size and your line quality just gets totally screwed up if you scale it. So there's a little known setting that you can adjust that will fix that. So I'm going to show you where it's at. If you go to the File menu, if you are on your PC, I think it's under Edit, but if you're on your Mac, it's under Preferences. And what we're going to do is go down to General, under Preferences, and open that window. And there's this little known adjustment here, Scale Stroke and Effects, and also Scale Corners. And here's what happens when those are selected. So watch now as I scale this box. Now if I scale this box down, notice how the stroke scaled proportionally with it. That's an important thing because what that does is it allows your artwork to scale proportionally as you resize it. Then if I scale it back up, you know that stroke is going to get bigger. So that's an important preference to be aware of. I think it's also available under the Properties dialog box. Shows up here on the side. But it's one of those troubling things that if you can't remember where it's at, it's usually held under the Illustrator Preferences. Okay, so that's a basic rundown of using the stroke and adjusting those lines to be this line quality you want. The last thing I would say is there are lots of ways to color those stroke lines. If you look here under the stroke over on the side, if you click on it, you can adjust and click and select the pre-made swatches. Or if you'd like to create a custom color, you can come over and select the stroke from the sidebar, double click it to bring it to the front, and that activates the color picker, and you could make a custom color here for your stroke lines. Alright, so I hope that helps. That's a basic little rundown of using your stroke settings. Let me know if you have questions, and I can answer them in the comments.